Joining us to discuss this further is Professor Alex van der Heever, Chair of the Social Security Systems Administration and Management Studies at Wits University. Good evening, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us on The Full View. So today, as you've seen there, the family of Babita Deokaran and several civil organizations are commemorating the 3rd anniversary of her death, and the SIU's Andy Mutibi speaking there on the much-awaited reforms on the Protected Disclosures Act. Your views on just what he has stated?
Yeah, so the first issue is that we still don't have an overriding culprit behind the assassination itself. And I think we should distinguish between the corrupt activities and the assassination itself. So the assassination has a chilling effect on the structures of government and the accountability structures. She was essentially a chief director responsible for supply chain management, and the threat to her clearly then impacts on the entire system. So where you have somebody committing this kind of murder, it becomes a threat to everybody else in that position. And if that's the last crime that you investigate and follow through on, all of the systemic effects continue. So that's the first issue. It's good that the other aspects are supposedly being investigated. It is still concerning that we don't have conclusive results with these investigations that have gone through, because there's a considerable amount of time and a considerable amount of evidence. And some of the issues that were raised by the SIU were known 2 years ago. So it's unclear as to why it takes so long and why even the disciplinary processes have taken an age. We note that when we have a whistleblower in the Department of Health, in the Gauteng Department of Health, the response from the provincial department is instantaneous to suspend that person and potentially threaten them and dismiss them if they have the chance and opportunity, if there's no fight back, as there was when they attempted it a year and a half ago. So the issue is, there it's instantaneous, but where you dealt with a systemic crime and corruption of this nature, the department is so slow. It's unimaginable as to how they managed a department with 75,000 people within it.
When listening a bit earlier on to the Ahmed Khatrada's Foundation's Nishan Bolton, he stressed the fact that there were plea agreements that were signed with these 6 convicted, but we don't know the contents of those. And one would assume ever so often that when you see such plea agreements, perhaps it's an agreement to expose who the mastermind is, but we still don't know.
Yeah, so first of all, we have the concern about how the investigation began into the murder, in that the key evidence, such as the laptop and the cell phone, were not actually investigated by the Hawks. And when they were handed back to the family a substantial amount of time later, it was found that nobody had actually examined them. Now, they might have been examined, but they weren't examined in the key period in which an investigation could have concluded. They allowed the trail to go cold. During that period, they also failed to obtain the cell phone of the chief financial officer to whom Babita Deokaran reported, and who Babita Deokaran indicated her concerns about Tembisa Hospital and the fact that she might be in danger. And she had blocked the transactions. Babita had blocked 100 million rands worth of transactions from going through. That CFO allowed the transactions to go through. The HOD denied that the CFO had actually informed her of what Babita Deokaran had requested, which was a full forensic investigation. So, and now we don't know who's lying there. Now it's 3 years later and we still don't know who's lying, and we don't know why the Hawks are incapable of locking down a cell phone and doing an examination of internal communications. Now, this is all related to the murder itself as opposed to the transactions. And you want that murder investigated. And it's quite clear, it looks very clear that the investigation was pulled. It was slowed down. There's no other explanation for the conduct of the Hawks during that period. And the enormous delay before the SIU got a proclamation to fully investigate this matter. It should have been a proclamation instantaneously, but it took years.
Do you get a sense that there's greater appreciation of the position that civil servants find themselves in here? Because in such an instance as one that Babita found herself in, there are many people in that position where you've got two options. It's either you sign off on an irregular payment or you actually refuse. If you sign off on that irregular payment, somewhere along the line, you will be disciplined, because once it's unearthed, you find yourself being part of those who are either before the courts for that kind of conduct. If not, if you refuse to sign off on that irregular payment, you lose your life. So it seems as though civil servants actually have no option, honestly. None of it looks good for them at this point.
So first of all, there are many measures, many ways of targeting a sort of a decent civil servant. So one is that you immediately accuse them of some other kind of disciplinary matter and suspend them, and then put them under such pressure that they resign. This is a common practice in government, to remove people in key positions and then replace them with somebody else. So that's the one. Then the other is, if somebody absolutely refuses to sign some document, then essentially you can, if you're removed from that position, it just gets signed by somebody else. So Babita was in a situation where she had taken specific action, and it was quite clear that the action that she was taken would have exposed relevant people. And the concern is basically that the entire departmental structure failed to act and to protect her. So yes, these people in these key positions are extremely vulnerable, whereas our politicians are not. Our key members of the executive sit with VIP protection. They have more money spent on them than the entire Hawks budget. And but the civil servants who are actually doing the work and in danger and in the coalface are at risk. And it's important to note that technically Babita Deokaran wasn't a whistleblower as such. She was somebody reporting up within the structures of the organization, of the Gauteng Department of Health. The information was there. She hadn't revealed it to a newspaper or gone to some external party. She went to her superior. And the immediate consequence of her actions was an assassination 2 weeks later. So this is in fact the procedure outlined in our legislation dealing with whistleblowers, is saying go through your departments first. Well, that's some of what happens. So you want to protect civil servants from actually talking to or revealing themselves to the very people that they are concerned about. So if they're raising this kind of misconduct, who is part of the network that is responsible for this? And if you're uncertain about that, it's going to have a chilling effect on everything that you do. It's extremely problematic, and that's exactly why the actions that government failed to take in this instance should have protected the role of civil servants first, which means it should have been immediate. It should have gone for the culprits responsible for the murder and followed up on the corrupt contracts over time, which you can do over time because there's a huge paper trail to follow there. But it's quite possible that they could get to the end of this paper trail and all of these corrupt individuals and these contracts and tenders and money flows, and yet leave the core perpetrators behind a murder free. And if we had to look at digital vibes, and we see who's been held to account there, was also an SIU investigation. Where's it gone? Sweli Mkhize is still sitting in Parliament, a chair of a portfolio committee. The relevant key personnel within the department responsible for manipulating the tender is still working, was given a temporary suspension and temporary demotion, and then reappointed back into a deputy director position, general position. That's not consequences.
I suppose, Professor, now you've got civil servants that will pin their hopes on those reforms on the Protected Disclosure Act as well as the Witness Protection Act, that hopefully they'll feel a bit safer there to disclose some of the corruption that takes place in government. But thank you very much for your time this evening. That's Professor Alex van der Heever, Chair of the Social Security Systems Administration and Management Studies at Wits University.